Hi, my name is Enda Murray, and I'm the director of the Irish Film Festival. I'm delighted to be joined tonight by Myrid Carten, the writer and director of the amazing documentary A Want in Her. Myrid, tá fáilte ráid, you're very welcome to the Q&A.
Gurmagat, thank you.
Look, Myrid, first of all, I want to say what an amazing film this is, and thanks for putting so much of yourself into this project. And I suppose people have just watched the film. People will be wondering, how is your mum at the moment?
Yeah, my mother's doing really well. She went to the premiere of the film in IDFA, and then she went to the Belfast premiere because it just showed at Docs Ireland here in Belfast. So that's been a really nice experience for us.
Now, could you tell me where did the idea for the film come from for you?
Well, I'm an only child, and my mother's one of 10. And I think growing up, I was always quite fascinated by her siblings and her family dynamic. My father's also one of 7, but my mother's family were real characters, as we say in Ireland. Um, and so whenever my mother's brother, he died in 2018 just from a heart attack. He was in his 60s, and I had this sense that this was my last chance to maybe archive and interview some of her siblings and have this sort of bank of their stories to maybe go back to, because they always had these very interesting stories about growing up. So that's how the project actually started. I thought it was going to be quite an interview heavy document, and circling especially around this rupture that happened when my grandmother passed away and the family kind of imploded. But actually, then when I was filming, my mother ended up going homeless, or not going homeless, becoming homeless, going missing, and then becoming homeless, and ended up back at that family house. So actually, this idea I had about it, if, going into the past, I didn't have to do it with so many interviews because the past made itself very present uh, in what was happening. So it was like all documentaries, I suppose. It's both a curse and a gift. Like often you set out making one type of film and then another film happens. I often say it's like being in the wrong place at the right time. So it kind of, I ended up following that story quite organically, and it became a very different film. But my initial inclination around my mother's siblings was right. There was a sort of domino effect where over the period of my filming, like 6 of them passed away every 6 months almost, which was also going on at the same time. So yeah, I'm glad to have filmed some of them anyway.
So I'm interested. I've made a film with my family myself, and just that idea of the very personal being made public. I know for a start. I'm one of 14, so big families in Ireland. But some of my brothers and sisters didn't want to be in the film. How did you navigate that? Those agreements or consent, or but I suppose also, yeah, there's just that idea of making your personal family very public.
Yes, I think we're a wee bit tapped. No offense, Linda. People say to me they're doing a personal project, I feel like, oh, it's a crazy thing to do. But sometimes it's almost like the impulse takes over. I don't think it's such a kind of cerebral, logical thing that you sit down and you think, oh, this is a really good idea. It's sometimes that you just end up grabbing a camera and you follow that impulse. Uh, so that was very much how I worked. I ended up going to my uncle's funeral with a camera, which was very strange, just to show up at all these funerals with a camera, and the footage would get progressively better because at the very beginning it was basically just the floor because I was so nervous. And I think one of the things was, and something that is worth knowing around consent, I learned so much on this film, but one of the things was that, isn't it Herzog when he rips it off with that idea of ask for forgiveness, not permission. But you know, well, the thing is, I filmed a lot of my mother's siblings, and it never made the cut, so I didn't even have to have those. Like I told them, obviously, that I was making this film, but I didn't have to get all these permission forms from them because actually it was just research at the end of the day. Those particular siblings. There's one of my mother's brothers who didn't want to be filmed. And actually I kind of found that the people that weren't really willing, I didn't really need them anyway. Not that I didn't need them, but it's almost like it wasn't in the nature of the project to really hound people who didn't want to be involved, it didn't serve the project. It then became far more focused around these events that happened around the house. So my uncle Danny, who was staying in the caravan, my uncle Kevin, and my mother are really the main characters in the film, and myself. And my uncle Danny, he told me to leave art school whenever I was, 8 years previous, to go and make a documentary about him. He's like, why don't you just follow me around and make a documentary about me? So he was very keen and up for it. And then my mother was used to me making films about her since that time. And I think she knew that it was part of our relationship, and it was sort of a gift that she could give back to me because she couldn't show up in other ways, which is complicated in itself, but um, it has it allowed me to show up for her at times as well and ask her questions that would otherwise be too loaded to ask. Um, and then my uncle Kevin was the one who was most, in a very human way, he was most concerned, I suppose, about how he came across and how he looked and etc. And I just, whenever I explained to him as the project was developing, like, look, this is not really about you. It's about me and my mother's relationship, and me and mommy's relationship, and your involvement in that. I actually kept telling them as well, which is true. Like, you're a great character. Like, you're a great character. You're great on film. You're great on screen. You're very funny. You're born to do this role, darling. Um, he started to have more confidence and less insecurity around it, but that was just a process. And then in the end, they signed, my mother and my uncle Kevin signed the consent forms, but my uncle Danny passed away before it came to that. So that's a very long answer, but that's the truth of it.
So you mentioned that you've been filming from a very young age, and then you went to art school, and you went to London, um, and you did some residencies. So you were. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what kind of art? What was your practice? You went to New York and you went to India doing residencies.
Like real jolly. Never got to Australia though. But the yeah, I it was again, it was my mother. She probably grused the day that she said it, but she encouraged me whenever I was a teenager to do. I always loved film, and I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker. But she sort of said, well, go to art school because artists make interesting films, essentially. Um, so I did that, and I did a painting for a while, and I did sculpture for a while, and I think I got into goldsmiths because of I was making huge sculptures out of like metal sculptures, and they thought, oh, a female making giant metal sculptures, and then as soon as I was there, I started making films. So, but I was doing a lot of stuff around it's kind of desire, female subjectivity. It was quite surreal sometimes. And I think then I was quite challenged at art school with, well, what about the political? What about the political? What about the reality? What about reality? I kept getting this question. And then my uncle Danny came to visit us and started talking about his wife and his family that he had. And I actually just happened to have the camera there for Christmas. So I was filming him. And this wife doesn't exist. This has it's been a fixed illusion that Danny has had for 40 years now, basically. So I made my first piece then. I used that material as my first piece to sort of, it was, I suppose it was a bit of a rebellion against my tutors at the time of like, well, reality is not completely fixed. You know, surrealism and reality are quite interwoven, actually, and psychology plays a big part. So that's how my family work sort of started to come in. But I've always danced between doing things around, sometimes quite stylized things around fashion. Um, but then this family project has taken quite a long time. It's been in the making for 5 years. So yeah, that's kind of been my messy journey. Um,
So, I suppose the question, what for you was the biggest challenge in making the film?
I think the biggest challenge was the that long drawn out period of development was one big challenge. Getting funding. It's very hard to get funding for your first film, and I understand why, especially a family film, because I think people think, well, you find them interesting, but is anybody else going to find them interesting? Um, so there was a long period of trying to get that development money. And actually, the thing that kind of unlocked that was whenever I was able to make a teaser that was 4 minutes and show the artistic vision of the work and the voice behind it and the singularity of the voice. And that helped people to think, okay, actually, maybe there's something in this. That was the first big challenge. And the other biggest challenge was, I think, being able to be detached from the story when it's so personal. And I think it was difficult in some ways because it felt like the stakes artistically were very high in that it was a real opportunity to find my voice, um, which can be quite emotionally weighted if you've struggled to be able to communicate these things in your personal life, you know, like things that you didn't really speak about or, you know, that you had to repress or hide. And this felt like a channel. Like this film was like, oh, I can have this channel, but then you have producers and funders and everybody has an opinion. So it was kind of how do I maintain a professional uh, detachment, but also really use this opportunity to um, communicate something. So it's quite an unusual film as well. You know, it's not the most conventional form, but we managed. You know, I feel like this. I made the film that I was meant to make or wanted to make, and I didn't. And the compromises were minor, really, in the end.
Great. I was going to ask you about some of the childhood scenes, and I was thinking of the work. I don't know if you're familiar with Sarah Polly and her film Stories We Tell, where she recreates and then she uses artistic license to produce fiction, which she then inserts into the documentary, and again investigating around her family. Was all of the material in there? Was that all like true documentary, or was any of it staged? I'm thinking more about the kids in the garden and
No, none of it was staged. So it all was these just 4 tapes that were like but each tape was like 40 minutes. And my father, you know, found these tapes 10 years later while I was in the middle of this project and got them digitized as a gift. And then I mentioned it to an editor. Again, never mention anything to an editor because they will be used against you. And she was like, let's watch them. And all this really rich material was there. So I didn't stage anything like in Stories We Tell. The only things that were sometimes employed was the phone calls. So I recorded everything, and everything in the film is basically um, had was true. Obviously, I had voiceover actors for the police because I didn't want to get arrested. And like I would ring up when the police would ring me, it would always say, "Oh, this call has been recorded," and I'd be like, "Yes, it is being recorded on my end, but you don't know that." But so I got voice actors to do the police, but then the actual opening of the film, that was sort of staged. So me and my uncle Kevin, he just did that for me because we needed this opening. So that was the only thing that was yeah crafted afterwards.
Great. Look, I'm very interested in migrant stories, and especially with our Irish Film Festival here in Australia. A lot of our audience have got that experience of moving countries. Now, you talk about your family being over there in Ireland, and I was wondering whether moving to England has given you some distance from your family that allows you to make a film like this because you've got that distance there. So
I think it's an interesting relationship. I often say when my people move to Australia, because I've had lots of friends whose siblings have moved to Australia's or whatever, and I'm always like, what are they trying to get away? That's what I think personally. I mean, obviously, it's such a beautiful place to live, but it's so far from Ireland. Like, it's such a far away place. But I think one of the things that happens, and I don't know if you would relate to this, Enda, but it's almost like you get this space, but then you also that space becomes start to fantasize about home quite a bit, and then longing sets in, and you start to miss it. And so there's both. It does give you space. It gave you space to process something that maybe you might have been stuck in if you were in Ireland, or and it's hard to process something when you're living it. So when you go away, you don't escape. In my experience, you never escape. It'll start to emerge. Like, I didn't want to do work about my family. I thought, I'm in London. Uh, they're over there being characters and complicated. But then it just started erupting like anything, you know. That Louis, I love for Louise Bourgeois, the artist, and she always quotes Freud, and like, um, what we repress will come out. I can't remember the quote at the minute, um, but it keeps repeating itself. So that's the feeling where I think, yeah, the space creates uh, an opportunity to reflect and to process something, because it will keep erupting into one's life and being displaced in various ways.
Thanks a million. I was going to ask you, what's been the journey of the film, and you mentioned IDFA. Um, have you had any other screenings of note? Obviously, you've made Sydney Film Festival.
Yeah, it premiered in IDFA, which was really amazing because it had a really good response from critics, which I wasn't uh, massively thinking about, but has been really helpful. And then it went to New York, and it went to Tree Falls in Missouri. Sadly, I couldn't travel because I was pregnant at the time. It's been in Singapore. It's been around Europe. Um, it's going to London next month. We're doing, and then it's having a cinema run. So it's been in Ireland. It won the Audience Award at Dublin and the Documentary Award, and then now we've got distribution in Ireland. So it's going to have a cinema run on October 10th, which is really exciting, and kind of the biggest aspiration I had for the film really was that it would have a cinema run. So I'm delighted about that.
And what working on at the moment? Did you say you've just had a baby? That's enough to keep you going.
Yeah, I just had a baby who's amazing. She's such a joy, and but my husband's a novelist as well, a writer, and he's moving more into film. So I I really love Pedro Costa. He always says, "Don't tell anybody about your next project because it is a gift, and you wouldn't tell anybody what you were giving them." But having said that, I'm really interested in exploring further the formal adventure that can happen whenever you are mixing not fact and fiction, but the fiction and non-fiction, and the space between. And we have an idea for a project around a migrant woman who is very complicated, brilliant woman, and looking at the hybrid forum as a way to tell that story. So I won't say any more as it is a gift, but yes, watch this space.
Brilliant. Myrid, thanks a million for taking the time, and congratulations again on a great film. And maybe someday you'll make it all the way down to Australia.
My best friend lives in Sydney, so hopefully.
Oh, well, that's a ticket. That's someone's going to buy a ticket for the film. Get on the blow. Gora míle maith agus slán agus bannacht.
Thank you,